Washington, the very heart of power in the United States, a place of presidents, monuments, and immortal speeches. But there was one day when it wasn't politicians who made history. It was a metallic roar that thundered over the Capitol. Thousands of motorcycles, thousands of modern outlaws, marching not with weapons or banners, but with the unstoppable power of their engines. This is the untold story of the bikers who conquered Washington. If you want to discover more hidden stories between politics, rock, and biker brotherhood, subscribe now. Don't miss it. The 70s were a storm in America. The Vietnam War claimed thousands of lives. Television broadcast images of fallen soldiers and burning protests in every city. The streets were divided. Some defended the government, others accused it of corruption and of betraying its own people. Trust in Washington collapsed. Every political speech sounded hollow. Every promise rang false. Washington, with its imposing Capitol, its marble columns and flags waving above, represented authority, absolute power, the system. A system that seemed built for the few, while millions felt ignored, silenced, cast aside. And at the other extreme, far from those gleaming corridors of power, there existed another world, the world of the bikers. They weren't mere motorcyclists. They were men and women who had chosen to live outside traditional rules, rejecting the cages of routine and the chains of society. They were called rebels, criminals, modern outlaws, but for them, they were free. Every leather vest carried scars, patches, and symbols that couldn't be bought in any store. They were oaths of brotherhood, pacts of honor sealed on endless highways. Every motorcycle was more than a machine. It was a steel horse, a totem of independence, a declaration against everything established. While Washington spoke in speeches filled with numbers and laws, bikers spoke in engines roaring like thunder. For them, the road was more sacred than any political temple. Brotherhood more powerful than any army. The clash was inevitable. Sooner or later, that Capitol that represented order and power would come face to face with that army of leather and steel that represented counterculture, disobedience, and freedom unchained. And when that day came, it wasn't just a meeting. It was a roar that shook the very foundations of the nation. No one expected it. Washington was used to student marches, unions waving placards, fiery speeches lost among microphones and flashes. But that day, it wasn't students or workers who marched toward the heart of power. It was them, the bikers. Entire clubs rose from different corners of the country, from California to Ohio, from Texas to New York. Thousands of men and women decided to ride together toward the same destination, the capital of the United States. They didn't come in suits, nor carrying printed slogans on cardboard signs.
They arrived in leather jackets weathered by sun and asphalt, tattoos telling stories of struggle and survival, and engines roaring like wild beasts announcing their arrival. The spectacle was surreal. The Capitol, with its white dome, untouchable symbol of the system, stood surrounded by an ocean of Harley-Davidsons shining under the sun. The vibrations of the exhaust pipes thundered against the marble walls like an endless storm. It was as if history stopped being written on official papers and began to be written in gasoline and steel. Bystanders watched in awe, some in fear, others with a fascination they couldn't hide. It was the invasion of a nation within a nation, a brotherhood long marginalized, criminalized, reduced to stereotypes, now stood in the center of power to remind the world of something no one could ignore. The message was simple yet deafening. Here we are. We are part of this nation, even if you try to forget us. We are not ghosts of the road. We are its deepest roar. And in that moment, Washington understood this was not a parade, nor a riot. It was a declaration of existence, a symbolic incursion that turned the outcasts into protagonists of history.
The images seemed torn from an apocalyptic film. Washington's most solemn avenues, built for military parades and diplomatic visits, were now blocked by endless columns of motorcyclists. From the horizon, a metallic roar rose like a distant thunderstorm, until it became a deafening rumble that made the ground tremble. The streets that usually breathe bureaucracy and formality transformed into something else, a biker highway in the very heart of political power. The roar of engines replaced official trumpets, and the smoke of exhausts blended with the solemnity of the monuments. American flags whipped furiously in the wind, but they weren't alone. Alongside them waved club insignias, skulls, wings, flames, symbols of rebellion that seemed to merge with red, white, and blue. For a moment, the nation and the brotherhood had become one single banner. The air was thick with gasoline, smoke, burning steel. The metallic echo of engines reverberated against the marble walls of the Capitol, as if the most sacred monuments of politics were forced witnesses to a new chapter of history. Helmets gleamed with reflections of the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, the obelisk standing as a silent guardian of that symbolic invasion. And most impressive of all, every motorcycle seemed to beat as part of the same heart. Thousands of pistons firing, thousands of exhausts roaring in unison, forming a symphony of steel and fire that resounded as one collective cry. We are here, and we will not be silenced. Bystanders, trapped in that spectacle, didn't know whether to feel fear or admiration. Some hurried away, others raised their cameras in disbelief, as if trying to capture the impossible. And among the applause of some and the tension of others, all agreed on the same thing. They were witnessing an unrepeatable moment, an instant where the history of the road and of political power merged into a single eternal image. If this scene is giving you goosebumps, hit like and subscribe. We have more stories where power and rebellion collide head-on. The next morning, the headlines exploded in contradictions. For some newspapers, what had happened in Washington was a spectacle of chaos, an invasion of anarchists over the Capitol. For others, it was something much deeper, a legitimate act, a demonstration of civic presence, a reminder that the nation didn't belong only to politicians in suits, but also to the outcasts of the asphalt. In smoke-filled bars, in university cafes, on radio stations connecting millions, everyone debated the same question. How was it possible that bikers, long seen as mere road outlaws, had taken the Capitol with such symbolic force? Society was unsettled, yet fascinated. Those men and women who for years had been demonized as criminals or reduced to stereotypes in low-budget films now appeared on front pages and newscasts as a brotherhood capable of defying political power on its own turf. And so, almost immediately, popular culture reshaped their image. They were no longer extras in a modern Western, nor villains in a forgotten movie. They became contemporary warriors, living symbols of resistance, a voice of steel the nation could no longer ignore. That day, bikers stopped being ghosts of the road and became protagonists of history. That roar in Washington was not just a parade. It was a declaration. A brotherhood that lives and dies by its own code proved that even the greatest power trembles when the road reaches the Capitol. Politicians speak with words. Bikers speak with engines. And that day, the message was clear. No one can ignore the voice of the brotherhood. Subscribe and hit the bell to never miss the darkest, most hidden, and most powerful stories of biker culture and rock and roll.